On tonight's summary of the Israel-Hamas War, day 158. Hamas's answer to the possibility of restarting negotiations is expected to be delivered in the coming days. The United States reportedly fears that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu will reject the deal. Ongoing fighting reported in Han Yunis in the areas of Hamid City as well as in the Abasan area in the east. In Hamid City, the Al-Qassam brigades reported ambushing IDF soldiers, while the IDF soldiers reported uncovering substantial weaponry and taking over more of the neighborhood. The World Food Program used a new IDF road in the Gaza Strip to deliver a food convoy to the northern parts of the Strip. This is the first such convoy to manage to get to the northern parts of the Gaza Strip since February 20th. Substantial escalations between the IDF and Hezbollah. The group fired over 100 missiles into Israel as the IDF retaliated deep into Lebanon. The IDF publishes a summary of its northern activity thus far, claiming over 4,500 attacks have been carried out in Lebanon since October 8th. Hello everyone, I'm Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute fellow at the University of California, Irvine, here bringing you the summary of the last 24 hours of the Israel-Hamas War. It is currently the evening of March 12th, 2024 in the United States, the morning of March 13th, 2024 in the Middle East. Starting with the hostage situation, there's ongoing back-channel negotiations being reported between the sides, with Egypt and Qatar applying monumental pressure on Hamas to deliver an answer that will allow the development of a negotiation framework to again be restarted. Israel is demanding a written answer from Hamas that will include a list of live hostages and the formula for how many Palestinian prisoners will be released per each Israeli hostage. Importantly, Israel is not saying that what Hamas gives is going to be the final answer. Israel just wants Hamas to give its position so that negotiations can be started. Yesterday it was reported the United States is proposing a 2 to 4 day truce in the Gaza Strip in order to give Hamas time to make contact with the different units guarding hostages and therefore be able to supply this list to Israel. There were conflicting reports that emerged today regarding what Hamas's position on this is going to be. The Al Arabiya news network reported that Hamas is considering a U.S. proposal and a delegation from Hamas will travel to Cairo in the coming days to discuss it. Hours later, however, Mahmoud Mardawi, who is a Hamas senior official, denied both that Hamas is considering this proposal and that a delegation is going to be traveling to Cairo. Meanwhile, there are other reports that the U.S. is expecting Hamas to give an answer in the coming days, and there is growing fear in the U.S. administration that Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is going to be the one who rejects anything that Hamas puts forward. Other news, despite the international pressure being reported, Qatari Foreign Ministry today denied that they are applying any pressure on Hamas, saying that Qatar is relying on the U.S. in turn to apply pressure on Israel to have a breakthrough in the negotiations. Other news related to the hostage situation, the IDF announced today that Itai Chen, who is an IDF soldier who was kidnapped on October 7th, was in fact killed in the initial October 7th attack. His body was kidnapped back to the Gaza Strip and he's being held by Hamas. Chen is also a U.S. citizen, and President Biden today also put out condolence messages and promised to do everything possible in order to bring all the hostages home as safely as possible. Moving on to the Gaza Strip, there were no reports of rockets or mortars sent from the Gaza Strip fired into Israel in the last 24 hours. Regarding the fighting in the Gaza Strip, in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, substantial bombing was reported in the Zeitoun region, reportedly killing 16 people. No reports were made regarding what the target of this bombing was. The IDF carried out major ground operations in Zeitoun in the last month. However, right now there's no on-site fighting on the ground. Bombings are still being reported almost every day. The IDF reported that in ground activity in northern parts of the Gaza Strip, several rocket launching arrays were discovered and destroyed. It was not reported specifically where these were located. In the central parts of the Gaza Strip, there was substantial bombing that was reported in the Mahata region and near el-Balah. Again, it was not reported what specifically was targeted in this region. The biggest bombing in this region was in the al-Nusrat refugee camp that was carried out several days ago, reportedly targeting a tunnel in which Marwan Issa, who is number 3 in the Hamas leadership in the Gaza Strip, was supposedly hiding along with other senior officials in Hamas. The IDF stated that there is some belief that he was assassinated and that this operation was a success. However, there is no denial or confirmation coming out from Hamas or the IDF yet. As of now, it's not known if Marwan Issa is in fact alive. In the southern parts of the Gaza Strip in Han Yunis, that's where the bulk of the fighting remains. Ongoing fighting was reported in the Abasan region and al-Qarara, both in the eastern parts of Han Yunis. Airstrikes were also reported throughout Han Yunis, with the IDF stating that Hamas operatives launching mortars were attacked from the air. In Hamid City, that's the western parts of the city, the IDF operation is continuing, with more weaponry being discovered and substantial gun battles reported by the IDF. At the same time, the al-Qassam brigades reported ambushing IDF infantry units in Hamid City, saying that 2 IDF infantry soldiers were pinned down as a gun battle raged between the al-Qassam brigades and the rest of their unit. The group also stated that IDF helicopters were seen evacuating dead and injured IDF soldiers from the area. There was no report about this from the IDF. And in addition to this, in Rafah, Palestinian sources reported large bombings against a building structure in the Janina area. This is in the eastern side of Rafah. No casualties were reported, and once again, there was no reporting about what exactly was being targeted. Other news related to the Gaza Strip. The U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan gave a press conference today, and among other things, he tried to clarify the statements made by President Biden about an IDF invasion to Rafah being a red line. He stated that Biden did not explicitly state that an invasion of Rafah would be a red line, but that he was rather answering a question about the subject. Sullivan added that the administration has been clear about Rafah and has yet to see a clear, viable plan for protecting the Palestinian civilians there, and that the United States will not support an IDF invasion until it sees this plan, adding, and I quote, "The path to regional peace does not go through destroying Rafah." Importantly, Sullivan is only partly correct about Biden's interview. Biden, in fact, was asked if he has red lines with regards to Netanyahu, and whoever was interviewing him stated, for example, if he invaded Rafah, would that be a red line? And Biden answered, yes, that would be a red line. So it is possible that to state that he did not explicitly say that an invasion of Rafah would be a red line, and maybe he was referring to his relationship with Prime Minister Netanyahu. However, it was very clear from that interview that he's also saying that Netanyahu ordering an invasion of Rafah after Biden asked him not to yet would be considered a red line for President Biden. So it's somewhat questionable what exactly Biden said or what exactly did he mean. Regarding casualties, no IDF soldier was reported killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, leaving the number of IDF soldiers killed in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began on 249. 2 IDF soldiers reported injured in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. The total number of IDF soldiers injured in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began is 1,475. The Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip is reporting that 72 Palestinians were killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of Palestinians killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began to 31,184. 72,889 Palestinians were reported injured in the Gaza Strip. I remind everyone that according to Israel's estimates, the IDF states that some 13,000 Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad members, and more broadly, fighters within the Palestinian population, have been killed. The IDF has not explicitly stated that the number that is cited by the Palestinian Health Ministry is wrong. It is simply saying possibly of those 13,000 are Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad operatives. Moving on to the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, the Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip reported that 2 more people have died from dehydration and malnutrition in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, bringing the total number of people who have died from these conditions to 27. It was not reported in which hospital they died or who specifically they were. In the past, it was reported sometimes they were children who suffered from different illnesses. In other cases, it was reported different people. In this case, it was not reported. Other news, the U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller stated today that Israel has promised the United States that it will open more land crossings to allow the entrance of more humanitarian aid into Gaza, again stating that the Israeli government has to do more about this. Other news, Reuters reported today that the World Food Program, that is the UN's main agency for food distribution, used a new road that was paved by the IDF in the Gaza Strip in order to deliver a substantial amount of food to the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. According to the report, a 6-truck convoy entered through the Kerem Shalom crossing in the southern parts of the Strip and used this new road that runs along the Gaza border fence, that is the border between Gaza and Israel, and reached Gaza City, and it was reported that it was carrying enough food for 25,000 people. This is the first successful World Food Program delivery to the northern parts of the Gaza Strip since February 20th. In addition to that, the World Health Organization reported delivering 24,000 liters of fuel, food, and medical supplies to the Al-Shifa hospital in Gaza City. According to a report, the hospital is dealing with some 42,000 patients and internally displaced people. That does not mean there's 42,000 patients in the hospital, but often people take refuge within the hospitals of the Gaza Strip since they are relatively protected from bombings and airstrikes, and thus 42,000 people may be housed within the hospital compound. In addition to this, there's continued missions of paradropping aid into the northern parts of the Gaza Strip throughout the last 24 hours. According to the United States reports, some 2,400 kilos of food were paradropped into this region. Other news, an extremely large shipment of flour from the United States has been delivered to Gaza from the Ashdod port in Israel. This comes 2 months after the promise Prime Minister Netanyahu gave to President Biden that this would be done, but this was largely held up due to political resistance in Israel. According to some reports, some aspects of this flour delivery were delivered before, some not. Right now, the entire bulk has been delivered. The shipment reportedly includes 114,000 tons of flour. Other news related to the maritime corridor that is gradually being developed, not just the port that the United States is going to develop, but this entire infrastructure to deliver aid from Cyprus directly by sea to the Gaza Strip. The United States reportedly is considering asking different allies to fund maritime humanitarian shipments that will begin even prior to the establishment of the temporary pier in Gaza. The aim is to begin a maritime corridor as fast as possible, while the pier that is meant to allow for a much larger docking will become operational within the next 30 to 60 days. Amidst this, the World Central Kitchen, which is an international NGO involved in food distribution, reported that the first ships carrying humanitarian aid are on their way from Cyprus to the Gaza Strip, and that one of these ships is going to dock in the area of al-Bidr, this is south of the Gaza City. According to reports, a temporary dock is being constructed out of the wreckages of different buildings that are a result of the bombings. This may be associated with the pictures that were disseminated several days ago that I showed also, showing large concrete pieces being transported towards the sea in order to start developing a dock or a pier in the area. In a separate mission funded by the United Arab Emirates and organized by the World Central Kitchen, after more holdups, a Spanish ship called the Open Arms left Larnaca today, that is in Cyprus, towards Gaza. It is reportedly towing over 200 tons of flour, rice, and other food supplies. It is not going to dock in Gaza itself, but rather small ships are going to ferry the aid into the area, and then it is going to be distributed by the World Central Kitchen to 60 different sites within the Gaza Strip. He reported that this is a pilot that is run prior to establishing the main maritime corridor, and according to reports, the United Arab Emirates has funded over 500 tons of aid that are already awaiting in Cyprus. After this mission is declared a success, they will start delivering them to the Gaza Strip. I will also add, if anyone wants more information regarding what has happened in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip and why the humanitarian situation got so acute in the last several weeks, I put out a video about that earlier today. Feel free to look at that in my channel. Moving on to the West Bank, there was an attempted Palestinian attack in a settlement in the West Bank. A Palestinian armed with a knife came to the outskirts of the settlement Givat Ronen and tried to stab an Israeli. He reportedly fled the scene, and the IDF launched a pursuit trying to hunt him down. Other news, the Israeli human rights organization Yesh Din publicized a settler attack that was carried out in the Burstein village in the West Bank. According to reports, one Palestinian car was torched by settlers and 2 more were badly damaged. Regarding IDF activity in the West Bank, substantial and unusual IDF activity was reported in Jenin. Reportedly, there was a raid in Jenin in the middle of the day, and the IDF arrested 3 Palestinians, including Mahdi Fiad, who is a known Palestinian Islamic Jihad operative in the area. In addition to this, in the Orif village, the IDF raided a weapons manufacturing area, confiscating equipment that reportedly was used in 4 different sites to make weapons. A total of 13 Palestinians were reported arrested in the West Bank in the last 24 hours. Other news, in Road 436, this is the road north of Jerusalem, a unit of 5 Palestinians was reportedly throwing Molotov cocktails at cars on a road that connected Ramot, that is the city north of Jerusalem, and Givat Ze'ev. Israeli border police units fired upon them, and the Wafa news network reported that 2 of them were killed and 3 of them were wounded. In addition to this, in the Shafat refugee camp in East Jerusalem, confrontations broke out between Palestinian civilians in the region and Israeli border police patrol. During the confrontations, the police reported that Molotov cocktails were thrown and fireworks were fired towards security personnel. A 12-year-old Palestinian, Rami Hamdan el-Khaluli, was shot and killed after firing fireworks in these confrontations. The Police Internal Affairs has reportedly opened an investigation after video footage that was released does not appear to show that the 12-year-old was aiming the fireworks at anyone. Meanwhile, Israel's Minister of National Security and the person who's in charge of the police forces, Itamar Ben-Gvir, said that he fully supports the Israeli police as they combat Arab rioters. Referring to the 12-year-old Palestinian, he said that he salutes the fighter who killed a terrorist who was trying to launch fireworks at the security forces. Moving on to the northern parts of Israel, southern parts of Lebanon, after the back-and-forth escalations between the IDF and Hezbollah in the last several days, with each side retaliating with more fire to previous attacks and then more retaliations and more escalations, today was the most intensive fighting day since the war began. Regarding rockets and missiles, substantial barrages were fired by Hezbollah towards the entire Galilee area in the northern parts of Israel, including over 100 Katyusha missiles and Burkan missiles that were launched in addition to other rockets that were launched throughout the day. The targets of these missiles included a range of areas including Shtula, Netuah, Matat, Fetusa, Chorafish, Rosh Hanikra, Givaton, Shlomi. There were also rockets sent towards Malei Yosef. Missiles were fired towards Snir, Shar Yeshuv, Rajar, as well as Klil, which is one of the farthest places south of the border that Hezbollah has targeted since the war began. Hezbollah stated that it fired Burkan missiles in 4 different incidents throughout the day as well. The movement also stated that it attacked an IDF drone and forced it to withdraw from the airspace of Lebanon, while another report stated that the Lebanese army found a crashed IDF drone armed with missiles in southern Lebanon. Possibly this is the same drone, possibly different. In addition, Hezbollah stated that it also carried out attacks against IDF outposts throughout the day. Regarding IDF activity, the IDF attacked a wide range of targets in several different rounds, responding to the various barrages. In the southern parts of the Baalbek region, this is relatively the northern parts of Lebanon, the IDF carried out 2 airstrikes in the area of Sarin, targeting 2 Hezbollah command centers. Lebanese sources reported that 2 people were killed and dozens were wounded in these attacks. Reuters also stated that at least one of those who were killed is a Hezbollah operative, adding that the attack targeted Hezbollah facilities. Other attacks were reported in the Bekaa Valley, some 80 kilometers north of the border of the Israeli border. In the area of Anabi Sheath, a substantial bombing was reported, with Al-Arabi al-Jadid stating that it targeted a main building in the municipality. In addition, earlier in the day, the IDF reportedly carried out attacks targeting Hezbollah military structures in the areas of El Hiam, as well as terror infrastructure in the areas of Bin Jbel. In addition to all this, Al-Manar reported attacks that were carried out in the areas of Ita Sha'ab. Lebanese sources also reported airstrikes in the villages of Hula and Hasbiya, and artillery fire in the areas of Marhaba as well. In addition to all this, Al-Arabi Jadid added information about the IDF attack that was carried out in Baalbek yesterday, stating that the target was a warehouse of advanced Hezbollah drones. The report also added that Hezbollah's air capabilities were damaged as a result of this attack. Responding to all these escalations and the IDF retaliations, Al-Arabi al-Jadid quoted Hezbollah's senior officials today, stating that the organization's response to the IDF's response to these escalations are going to increase, and that all options are on the table, specifically citing the IDF attacks in Baalbek and the Bekaa Valley as part of the escalations that the movement is going to retaliate against in the coming days. In addition, there was a meeting publicized today between the leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, and Khalil al-Khaya, who is a deputy of Yahya Sinwar in the Gaza Strip. The two reportedly discussed the ongoing regional developments and how Hezbollah is taking part in the war. Amidst all these escalations, the IDF published a summary today of its activity against Hezbollah since the war began. According to the IDF, over the last 5 months, the IDF has attacked over 4,500 targets, including 1,200 airstrikes and over 3,100 ground assaults. In addition to the general list of targets, the IDF reported that it also destroyed over 450 infrastructures belonging to the Radwan force, that is Hezbollah's main commando units, over 70 heavy launching infrastructures, and over 150 lookout posts of Hezbollah in Lebanon. In addition, over 70 manned command centers were attacked. The IDF also estimates that over 300 Hezbollah operatives have been killed since the war began, and over 750 were injured. In addition to all this, in Syria, the IDF reported carrying out airstrikes against Syrian army infrastructure in the Quneitra area, stating that these facilities were used by Hezbollah. El Miadin reported that 2 people were injured in this attack. Moving on to some of the political and general trends for the last 24 hours. After yesterday, the United States intelligence services published their threat assessment report, and among others stated that Prime Minister Netanyahu's government is relatively shaky and that there's likely to be growing protests against the government, and also outlined ways in which the government may be replaced. Today there was a response in Israel. A senior political official, which is sometimes code for the Prime Minister's office, is reported in different news sites as stating, and I quote, "Israel is not a protectorate of the United States. It is an independent democratic country whose citizens elect the government. We expect our friends to work to overthrow Hamas's terror regime and not to work to overthrow the elected Israeli government." Amidst this, the Politico network today cited 4 U.S. officials stating that President Biden will consider limiting aid to Israel if Israel moves towards a full-scale invasion of Rafah. So this comes amidst all of this escalations in diplomatic rhetoric between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Biden, and the monumental pressure that the United States is mounting against Israel to not launch its invasion against Rafah. Politico is now stating 4 different officials, some of which are considered, according to the report, to be close aides of President Biden, stating that he will consider limiting Israel's aid and military aid if Israel carries out that invasion. Other news, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke today via video conference at the AIPAC meeting. Seemingly still answering Biden's criticism, he directed a message to, quote, "our friends in the international community," stating, and I quote, "You cannot support Israel's right to defend itself and then object when Israel utilizes that right. You cannot say that you support Israel's goal in destroying Hamas, then object to Israel when it does what it needs to do in order to achieve that goal. You cannot say that you oppose Hamas's strategy of using civilians as human shields, then blame Israel for the civilian casualties that are a result of Hamas's strategy. He added that he knows that the majority of Americans stand with Israel. This is very likely answering what President Biden said, that Israel has not done enough in order to protect Palestinian civilians, and that while Israel has the right to defend itself and to do what it takes to hunt down Hamas, you cannot have another 30,000 Palestinians dead in pursuit of that goal. In addition to all this, there's major political drama that's brewed in Israel in the last 24 hours, which may have a substantial impact on the way the war is run. Gideon Sa'ar, who is one of the main figures in Benny Gantz's party and a member of the expanded cabinet, split the party in two today and left with his faction to recreate his old party before he joined with Gantz. Calling himself the true stately right wing, he demanded a seat in the war cabinet as well, which, if it were to happen, would dramatically shift the balance of power within that body. Meanwhile, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who is also a member of the expanded cabinet and is one of the most hawkish figures in Israel's government, announced that if Sa'ar is given a seat in the war cabinet, he is going to demand one as well, which would drastically change the way the war is run. It is also noteworthy, however, that with Sa'ar's faction separating from Benny Gantz, Gantz's ability to threaten the government cohesion is also diminished. So on the one hand, this somewhat threatens Prime Minister Netanyahu because he's coming under a lot of pressure to add more elements of the war cabinet, specifically elements he does not want, like Itamar Ben-Gvir. In turn, it also puts Netanyahu in a much more convenient political position because Benny Gantz now lost a lot of his ability to threaten Prime Minister Netanyahu's coalition by leaving the government. If you enjoy these reports, please do remember to subscribe, give them a like. If you want to know when reports come out, turn on notifications. If you have questions or comments, leave them in the comment section. If you have specific things that you'd like me to put out special videos about, like I did, about what's going on in the humanitarian situation in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, feel free to leave that in the comment section as well. That is my report for the last 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow.